To start this story of the Colorado City letter carrier, we must first return to a past time, a much different era, when the territories of Utah, Kansas, Nebraska, and New Mexico were made up of the Colorado area. The territory was organized in the wake of the 1859 Pikes Peak Gold Rush, which had brought the first large contingent of white settlement to the region. Colorado's population in 1860 was 34,277, and by 1890 the population had grown to 413,249. During this time, the Pony Express ran from 1860 through 1861 for only about 18 months. The Colorado proportion of the historic Pony Express Trail was approximately 26 miles long. Leavenworth, Overland Stage, and Pikes Peak Express provided mail service after 1861 under government contract. Wells Fargo also carried mail under government contract, traveling by stagecoach over the Smoky Hill route linking up with the Union Pacific Eastern Division terminus at Salida, Kansas. This was known to be used to as late as February 1872. Free city delivery had been established by Congress in 1863, and by 1864, free city delivery had been established in 65 cities. But Colorado had to become a state first. In 1879, Denver, Colorado had its first 6 city letter carriers, but 3 weeks later, one of the carriers quit and the position was filled by the substitute. In 1895, the town of South Denver was annexed to the city, and by October 1896, the first post office station was established in South Denver with 9 carriers. In the 1902 postal record, it shared an article saying, "Such is the rule that occurs at best are poorly remunerated when they are accepted after passing 2 strict examinations. They are placed on a substitute list and their pay is fixed, who may be disabled by sickness or other causes from performing their duty. The earnings of the substitute carrier average not more than $30 a month. The records of the Denver office reflect that men appointed to serve an average of 3.5 years as substitutes before they receive appointments as regulars. The pay during the second year is $800, and if a man survives in the service to the 3rd year, his pay becomes $1,000 a year thereafter. No allowance is made for uniforms nor anything in the shape of government pension fund." Postmasters and groups of citizens or city authorities could petition the post office department for free delivery service if the city met population and postal revenue requirements. The city had to provide sidewalks and crosswalks and be sure that the streets were named and lit, and assign numbers to the houses. City carrier service began in November 1912 at the Littleton Post Office as one of only 15 cities in a nationwide experiment by the Postal Department to see whether it could be successful in towns of not less than 1,000 in population. The number of patrons grew from 150 to over 800 within a year. They were asked to put up some kind of mailbox for their mail. In 48 cities around Colorado, there are dates that the first rural routes were established at post offices from 1900 to 1904, and that includes the Ode to the Bee's very own post office of Montclair. But that's a story for a different time. Carriers. In regard to the increase of salary, some say, let good enough alone. You may get less. Yes, the government could hire men for $400 a year, but what amount of intelligence would they have? What kind of service would the public get? The greater the salary, the more efficient the carrier in the force. Look at the responsibility in the work required. While work is laborious and your clothes get soiled from the exposures to all kind of weather, does not the work require the intelligence of the clerk or the office employee of any of our business houses? Then compare the salary of the carriers to the office employee, and you will find that the clerk gets more pay for less work and responsibility, and has a longer lease on life. $1,200 a year with pension after 20 continuous years makes the service much more efficient and give the carrier a goal to work for. This bill was presented by Mr. Chapman of Michigan from the Postal Record 1910. 1920 Postal Record. The average salary of the carriers in 1919 was $1,305.02, as compared with $1,087.57 in 1913. Nearly all the mail cities were delivered by foot carriers, who also made collection from street letterboxes, as the weight limit on a single piece of mail of any class was 4 pounds, and the average weight of parcels was less than 6 ounces. Through the installation of parcel post, the volume of the first class parcel post mail has been many times multiplied until approximately 2,750,000,000 parcels are now hauled annually. The average weight of the parcel now exceeds 3 pounds, with the maximum of 70 pounds, as approximately 1/3 of all the parcels are received for delivery at city carrier offices. There has, in this period, been a transition in the needhood of effecting delivery, which has necessitated the installation of an efficient and comprehensive system of motor vehicle service. Here is a partial visual timeline of delivery in cities. Collection vehicles. The Post Office Department originally painted motor vehicles red, white, and blue, but changed the color to vermilion red beginning in February 1913, then switched to green, red, and black in October of that year. By 1915, the department returned to red, white, and blue color scheme for its vehicles. Beginning in 1921, most of the postal fleet consisted of trucks transferred from the War Department. Postal vehicles were painted olive drab. The color scheme reverted to red, white, and blue in 1954. Delivery vehicles. Although some enterprising letter carriers from Los Angeles used their own autos to deliver mail as early as 1912, cutting their 8-hour workdays down to 4, the Postal Department did not motorize city delivery routes until the 1950s in response to unprecedented suburban growth. Bands. One of the earliest examples of postal worker camaraderie after hours is the creation of the letter carriers bands through the National Association of Letter Carriers. The NALC was organized in 1889, and letter carriers bands arrived soon after. The letter carriers bands began playing at the first National Association of Letter Carrier conventions, where many of the bands would join the letter carrier parade at the beginning of the convention to help increase union solidarity and excitement. However, each band had its own local engagements, most often to celebrate members of the post office. Letter carriers bands would also give local concerts to raise money for uniforms, new instruments, or funds to travel to the next convention and play at post office events. During the height of their popularity, letter carriers bands were very important in the creation of camaraderie because they would kindle the union spirit at the NALC convention and rallies. Not only within the NALC, but for postal workers as a whole, because music can be enjoyed by everyone.
At the turn of the century, the National Association of Letter Carriers began work on retirement legislation, and Branch 47 immediately got behind the idea and contributed its share to the legislation. As a result, the Retirement Act went into effect after 1920. Retirement legislation was always supported by the local. Following World War I, wages were at a standstill for 8 years until the Congress overrode the veto of President Coolidge. The 40-hour work week into effect 1935. Because of the need to create jobs during the Depression, wages then ranged from $1,700 to $2,100 at the top. Branch 47 during World War II had over 100 members in the service in all parts of the world. Denver had held 2 other national conventions before 1962, the first in 1902. This was the 13th convention of the National Association of Letter Carriers. They held the 34th convention. The convention was to be held in Denver in 1942, but was postponed 1 year because of the restrictions on transportation. Nevertheless, the 1943 convention was a huge success. 8 bands were present at the convention. A buffalo was acquired from the city of Denver Mountain Park and barbecued and served at Elitch Gardens. 1962 meeting was the most outstanding of all the NALC's conventions. A picnic at Jefferson County Fairgrounds was an outstanding event with the best chuck wagon, luncheon, and a full-size rodeo. It was the largest delegation in the National Association of Letter Carriers history at that time.
Branch 47 went from a meager beginning of 20 members in 1890 to a membership of 1,052 in 1965. From a salary of $650 per year to the present $6,650. From no fringe benefits to the present 26 days vacation and sick leave, including substitute and uniform allowance. From 50 to 60 hours per work week to the present 40 hour. And vastly improved working conditions. This was a brief capsule in the story of the 75 years of history of Branch 47 as a member of the NALC. This union came into existence because of a need on the part of a small group of letter carriers to express themselves and have a voice in salary, legislation, and working conditions. Meetings in the early days were frowned upon, so they were often held secretly at members' houses. Basically, we assume the problems of the letter carriers were like those in any line of endeavor. They were striving for recognition of their rights because they believed in the dignity of men. Once the branch was established, they were still faced with the threats, including sometimes the loss of their jobs. The more things change, the more they remain the same. We understand among your objectives is to stir up Uncle Sam about the amount of money he is paying you for your labor. I think that is a good idea. I was surprised when I learned what the salary of a first-class letter carrier was. I wondered what Uncle Sam was thinking about, demanding the high intelligence it requires to be a letter carrier, the education it requires, and the integrity it requires to be a letter carrier, then offering such low salaries. I want to say seriously, I do not think even one representative in Congress can say you are amply and fairly paid for your services. This was an excerpt from the speech by Honorable Charles D. Griffith, President of the Commercial Club of Denver, Colorado, opening the 13th Annual Convention of the NALC, September 1902.
The 60s, a decade of change. I believe that the federal employment practices should be a showcase, maintained in every respect without discrimination and with equal opportunity. This statement was by President John F. Kennedy on the establishment of the President's Commission on the Status of Women, December 1961. This commission was to study the federal employment practices and policies and federal and state labor laws to determine what needed to be done to demolish the prejudice and outmoded customs which act as barriers to the full partnership of women in our democracy. Specifically to their employment, Kennedy thought that the federal government should lead the way by example. In 1962, he ordered that federal appointments and promotions be made without regard to sex. Kennedy's 1962 order opened the door to federal employment for many women. The number of women city carriers jumped from 104 in 1960 across the country to 370 in 1965 across the country. The first recorded Denver lady mail carrier at this time still had not happened. In 1967, the Rocky Mountain News reported North Glen Girls is Denver's first female letter carrier. Cynthia Ann Agee, 19 years old. Other women have passed the written requirements, but Cynthia was the first woman to pass the physical test, said Postmaster George A. Cavender. She appears to be an enthusiastic young lady and we hope she will work out satisfactorily. Cynthia's dad has carried mail for 12 years at this time. For the first 90 days, she will be on probation and therefore will not wear a uniform. If she wishes, she can send away for a female carrier hat. At the end of 90 days, she will become one of Denver's post office's 148 carrier substitutes and will be paid $5,300 a year. The post office has a total of 1,076 carriers, 734 regular carriers, the carrier substitutes, and 195 temporary substitutes. At the end of about 3 years, if the job appeals to her, she'll probably become a regular carrier, Cavender said. As noted in the article, she was to report to duty on Saturday at South Denver Station, where her male co-workers have been reportedly ordered to take a bath, wear cologne, and cut out the cursing.
We are living in fast and challenging times, but I am sure if I were to ask any one of the members what our goal for the future was, he'd say a strong branch with continued and diligent effort to better the life of our fellow man in search for a better understanding of our problems. Towards this goal, we are confident we will continue to strive with the thought in mind that we are human and prone to make mistakes, but asking for wisdom and tolerance to solve the problems of tomorrow. Julius Valentine.
How do we save a life? Pointing fingers. How can we end the fight this way? One blames the truth we're preaching, and lies are what we're believing. No one ever wins when the goal is to settle the score. One by one we will call for a ceasefire. One by one we will fight for a better end. One by one we can rewrite the headlines, standing side by side. One by one love is building an empire. One by one reaching out to our enemies. One by one we will make transform our hurt into hope and grant us your peace. Teach us how to